Changing topics to a big snow in the 50s.
There was it had a hedge completely around the park at that time, pretty high. And we pushed snow with a dozer off the street and into the park. Didn't have any place else to put it. And the original fountain was there, well, original to me anyways. And we pushed snow clear to the middle and right over the top of that hedge by packing snow into it. It was so hard that you could drive the dozer over the top of it without breaking down the hedge. And the snow was probably 40 to 60 foot deep in the middle of the square. I'm pretty sure I have pictures of that somewhere. I need to dig out.
What year would that have been, do you think?
Oh, in the 50s, mid-50s there somewhere. Just not for sure what year.
Talking to Bill Garrett, and he's going to continue the talk from the other tape, and he's going to talk about remembering where some black people lived, maybe something about Cecil Scott, maybe something about town characters.
Yeah, the Cecil Scott and his mother was still alive, but they were the only two colored people in town when I was a kid. They used to go down Park Street north and past the old powerhouse and dam, and then the road turned around and went east down on the bottom there, and there was some shacks that nobody lived in anymore, but they were supposedly where the colored people had lived down below the hill there. And
did you ever hear about a black cemetery being up in that end of town?
not in that end of town, I never did. I helped dig the hole to dig a hole under the old dam and help set charges in that when I was a kid to blow the original dam up. It had a bridge across the top of it, and the seawall was over to the west. My dad took the bridge down, the one north of town and the one over to what we called the island at that time.
That's why you got to help.
Yeah.
What were done with the pieces, the metal pieces, the structure itself?
It was piled on that lot south of our house there on Lincoln Street, the end of Lincoln Street. And Dad sold parts of it off at times, and mostly sold it for iron. They pulled it off the abutments, and there were some huge limestone rocks that were, the abutments were made out of hand-carved limestone. And they were big. There was quite a few of them hauled around town to different people. Up here where Beano McLean lived, there was a row of them between there and Pete Jenkins' house. They dumped in there years ago, and Nels Hicks bought that place and hauled them off. And I don't know who ended up with them, but they were about probably 16 inches thick and 3 foot by 4 foot. They were big rocks. Those got hauled all over town at one time. I don't remember seeing any of them around for a long time. Yeah.
What about town characters?
Yeah, Eagle Eye was here. He was my understanding that him and my granddad used to bootleg together. This story's been told about They lived south of the golf course, my granddad did. They were bootlegging, and the sheriff went out, tore the still down and put it in the back of the car and went in the house to arrest Granddad. And Eagle Eye come up the creek and saw what was going on, so he took the still back out of the sheriff's car and was setting it back up when the sheriff drove off with Granddad. When they got to court, Granddad knew the sheriff had the still and everything, so he pled guilty, got 30 days in jail, and the sheriff didn't have any evidence because Eagle Eye had stole everything back. He was around a lot when I was a kid. He wrote, we took some hides one time off to sell hides, and he had a sack and wanted us to take it, and there was a couple of coon hides in there and some possum hides that weren't worth anything, but he had wrote on this note that these hides belong to Georgie Baker. I'm trying to make it sound like he was some kid, so the guy gave him $1 a piece for his hides that weren't worth anything because he thought he was a kid and he was an old man.
What was his real name?
George Barker.
Did he talk to you as a kid?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah, he was around quite a while after I was married. I believe he came in, my dad said the first time he ever saw him, he was about 15 years old. And Eagle Eye come into town on a train and jumped off the train. I heard someplace in the family telling tales about him and stuff that he actually came into this area from New York City on an orphan train. They used to they had the orphans, they'd put them on the train and bring them out, and people would take them in to help them work the farms and stuff. And that's how he actually ended up here. He was an orphan out of New York City. Actually, Buffalo, New York, I think.
Did he ever have a full-time job that you know of?
No, he only had one eye. He said he lost the other one looking for work, and he wasn't about to try that again. He never had a job that I knew of.
I heard that he rendered down skunks. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Right here in town that he might have done that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I seen him drop a pint of whiskey on the floor one time, and he'd been skinning some pretty rotten stuff there a few days before, but he wasn't going to waste the whiskey. He got down and licked it all up. And when he got done, there was a little pile of glass but he licked it up like a dog lapping out of a dish. And he got the whole pint of whiskey off the floor.
Where exactly did he live?
Everywhere. He lived the other corner down here at one time. He lived,
Is the structure still there?
No.
No.
This one isn't. No, it's gone. He lived out there at one time where John Walsh lived, where he lived in that house. He's lived in about all the houses in town at one time or another.
What about the time that whatever he was living in, he blew it up? It exploded around him.
Yeah, the garage down there on the highway. And Bob Wilcox had moved out and screwed the pipes out of the floor. And they turned the gas on. Eagle Eye had the gas turned on, and it filled up the cavity underneath the floor with gas, natural gas. And he turned on a light switch, and you could hear him down in there hollering, "Somebody better have a drink for me when I get out of here." It had killed a normal man.
Was that on that cement slab just south of the liquor store now? Is that where that
No.
garage was?
No, it was where the rental place is there now. It was east of that. There used to be a whole row of buildings in there. There was a shop, and then this building that people lived in, and then there was C.P. Gillespie had a car lot in there at one time and done work on cars, sold cars out of there. And it was in that, it was the second building from the east of Union Street. Right next to Union Street was a shop building, and then the next building over was the one that blowed up.
So did it take out other buildings when his went out?
No, I don't think it didn't. The shop building was there for several years after that.
And who had that shop?
C.P. Gillespie.
Do you remember any tourist cabins along that end of the highway? Like the early motels?
No, the only cabins I remember was north of the doctor's office. There was 3 little cabins in that, what's his parking lot now. One of them blowed up too, the middle one. But I don't remember. I don't remember the cabins, no.
What about other town characters?
Oh. There was a few of them. One lived over here on the corner. Ed Richmond. That would have been Al Singleton's granddad. He was, they used to sit in the, where the police department is up in the square, the old timers would sit there. When I was a kid, they'd sit on there in the summertime and chew tobacco and give us kids a hard time. Well, we was there giving them a hard time too, I guess. But Ed Richmond sat there, but he talked so slow. He said, somebody sat on his hand one time and he says, "Would you get up, John? I'm trying. I think you're sitting on my finger." Just he talked real slow. He was a nice guy. But, yeah, that was Al's mother's dad. He lived just catty corner over the corner over here.
Where the trailer is?
Yeah, where the trailer is. But I remember him. He took my Uncle Earl, my dad's brother Earl, lived with him for a while, I think. He was quite a guy.
What about Marshall Worthington or, oh, I've forgotten the name of some of the other marshals around town, sheriffs, deputies, whatever.
Yeah, Dick Worthington was he was pretty tough, but he was fair. He was they robbed a hardware store one time when I was a kid, I remember that. They went in and hauled a safe out in the daytime. Took it out north of town up here. Reeds lived up there on the farm. Blowed the door off him and threw it in the creek. And I remember for a long time after that, Dick Worthington was up and down that alley all the time. Day and night. He was hoping he'd come back, I think. I don't know. And let's see, who was after him was, well, that was Bill Davis. And then Dick Worthington was after him. And yeah, Bill Davis was the first one that used to chew me out, I guess, when I was a kid. Then Dick Worthington, he had a deputy, was Higginbottom, Charlie Higginbottom. Worked as a deputy for a while. That was Kathleen Woodyard, granddad. Charlie Higginbottom. His wife's name was Rosie, and she worked in the Sorik's drugstore on the west side where the car wash is now.
Is that where you guys hung out?
Yeah, that a lot. We hung out there a lot. Used to read the comic books and put them back in the rack.
Did you hang out at the, what was the cafe on the west side of town?
Del Rio.
Yeah,
Cafe.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I can remember you used to get a school lunch in there. You got a ham sandwich and a scoop of potatoes and gravy for $0.25. Must have been a while ago. Yeah, Del Rio Cafe.
Who ran the Del Rio?
Jimmy Tubbs.
We're going to talk a bit about the Black Cemetery again and what might have happened to the stones and where you lived down there on Lincoln.
Yeah, it was, we lived at 1007 Lincoln, and we had an empty lot at 1009 Lincoln. And that's where the steel from the bridges was piled at one time, and when they dug the pit for the first concrete elevator, the dirt was hauled over there and piled on that lot. And then we hauled it back west and put it in a offloading ramp for the railroad. And then it ended up being trucked out of there a few years later, back down here in the bottom, across from north of where Billy Dewalt lived.